Do y'all remember when Max Crosby threatened to demand a trade if the Raiders didn't hire Antonio Pierce to be their full-time head coach? Well, ever since Antonio Pierce got the permanent head coaching job, the Raiders have been one of the worst teams in the NFL. They are 2-7 and last place in the division. They're 0-3 against everybody in their division at the moment. They got a bottom four offense in the league. They're 28th in points per game. They're 31st in rushing yards per game. Their defense was massively overhyped by Raider Nation. A lot of Raiders fans coming into this year believed that this was going to be an elite defense. They were going to have a top 5, top 10 unit, and they've been everything but that. They are allowing 26.3 points per game on that side of the ball, which is 27th in the league. And Antonio Pierce is a former linebacker. He was a defensive-minded coach, so you know the offense wasn't going to be good this year because he made an awful decision to fire the higher offensive coordinator Luke Getsy, who was the dude who was responsible for Justin Fields not succeeding in Chicago last season. And he recently just parted ways with him. You had no quarterback, even though you kind of got screwed by the Falcons because you probably were going to get Michael Penix, but they ended up making a crazy decision to draft him in the top 10, which nobody expected them to do. And you ended up being kind of asked out because you know that you were handicapped going into this season. You knew you were handcuffed because your two best options at QB were Aiden O'Connell, which remember when there were Raiders fans saying how this dude was going to be the next Tom Brady? Yeah, how did that work out? And then Gardner Minshew, who looked capable with the Indianapolis Colts, he's looked everything but with the Raiders because he doesn't have as good as a play caller as what he had in Shane Steichen when he was at Indy. So the Antonio Pierce regime right now in year one looks like a complete disaster. And it looks like the Raiders got fool's gold with this dude. This was somebody that finished last year on the high note. After they fired Josh McDaniels, the team looked more competitive. They finished with the 9-8 record, and you felt pretty hopeful about what this season could be with AP taking over the helm for the entirety of the season. But this has been a massive disaster. And with Tom Brady getting minority ownership in this franchise, you got to wonder because you know that the Raiders owner is going to be heavily leaning on him to make a lot of decisions, not just from a player personnel standpoint, but from a staff standpoint. And if you're Brady, I don't see why you would want to keep Antonio Pierce around. And the thing about Antonio Pierce was that he was supposed to be a great value version of what Mike Tomlin is. You know, really good on defense, great motivator. The players love him. But it's just you look at how left the situation with Davante Adams went. If you're a player's coach and players like you, Davante Adams shouldn't have been as frustrated as what he was despite the Raiders' struggle because he loved AP. I don't hear Max Crosby talking about Antonio Pierce in the same light now as what he was when he wanted him to get the interim head coach job. You ever had a substitute teacher that you really liked and you wanted them to be your main teacher? But, you know, when they got the opportunity to show what they could do with that, they weren't really that good. They kind of switched up. That's Antonio Pierce. You know, he was well-liked when he was the interim head coach. It's a difference when you're grinding for a position of authority and you finally get it. You become a little bit complacent. The halftime adjustments haven't been there. And outside of coming back against the Baltimore Ravens and beating the Browns, Las Vegas has been a really disappointing team because going into this year, most of the Raiders fan base wasn't expecting this to be a playoff team. You were hopeful that you could win 7-8 games, but we're midway through this season and we already are talking about what the Raiders are going to do in next year's draft. Are they going to take Shedeur Sanders? Are they going to take Cam Ward? What are they going to do at the quarterback position? And we still got 2 months of football left to be played pretty much. This just shows you why Antonio Pierce was fool's gold. The Raiders got fooled by this guy. The guys in the front office got fooled by him. The locker room got fooled by him. And now they're stuck with a coach that looks to be in over his head. Antonio Pierce, he doesn't look qualified to be a head coach at the NFL level right now. He never really had that much experience being a coach in the NFL anyway. He was a former player And, players that, were former players, they do tend to have a better chance of connecting with the guys in the locker room, but it just seems to be a little bit of a disconnect with AP. I don't see a new culture established in the Raiders locker room. And I just saw Max Crosby in a post-game interview say that he was effing tired of losing. They've lost 5 straight. He thought coming in that Antonio Pierce was going to be able to make this a winning football team, and he was fooled. And I got a lot of respect for Max Crosby because despite how bad the Raiders continue to be, he refuses to allow this team to trade him. This dude has the Raiders tatted on him. He loves the Raiders. He is fully committed to turning this franchise around. But in order for that to happen, you got to get rid of Antonio Pierce. Even if you do give him a quarterback, the defense hasn't been good. The sign that you have a head coach that isn't good is when they specialize in a certain area of the ball, whether that be offense or defense, and that's the worst area of your football team. And although it's not the defense that is solely responsible for why this team has been bad, mainly the offense, the defense hasn't been this outstanding defense that Raiders fans were expecting coming into this season. This is not a top 10 unit, not even close to being a top 10 or top 5 unit. And you do have a few good players like Max Crosby, Nate Hobbs, and Jack Jones, but your linebacker unit could be better. And you really just aren't that good of a team, and that's why you are the worst team in your division and one of the worst teams in the league overall, just because you're not a good coach, you're not a well-coached football team. And Raiders fans make it seem like people that talk down on them are hating on them, but there's no reason to hate on a franchise that hasn't won a playoff game since I came in the womb. The Raiders have only had 3-4 winning seasons since I've been alive. That shows you how bad and how dysfunctional this franchise is, and that's why they still continue to be the biggest laughingstock in the league. You got a head coach that just isn't qualified for the job. When the Raiders get wins, you kind of feel like they're fluky wins. You don't really feel like the Raiders earned it. Andy Dalton just torched Antonio Pierce's defense. This was a backup quarterback, by the way. And I get it that Bryce Young isn't that good and Andy Dalton is much better than what he is, but for the Panthers, as bad as what they are, for them to just light up the Raiders and have their best performance of the season against Antonio Pierce's defense shows you that this guy is just not cut out to be an NFL head coach. He's one of those guys that's a good position coach because he gets along with the players. Guys love being coached by him, but in terms of being a head coach and handling all the responsibilities that comes with it, he just doesn't look fit for this job.